Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'd like to tell you a story about one family with two guiding principles, trying to get their heads around the three secrets of profit and how this influenced the four topics that I studied on my Nuffield Scholarship. I'd also like to share with you the 5 reproductive strategies that we're working with within our business to work with nature. And finally, to keep with the numbers theme, I'd like to finish by looking at how the whole is actually greater than the sum of all those parts. So our family story in Australia started in 1883 when my great-grandfather left Ireland as an 18-year-old man in search of a better life. In 1912, he purchased Wambiana Station, the property that I now manage with my wife for the family business. And so it's been under our stewardship for over a century. My parents, John and Rhonda Lyons, are the head of our business and are pictured here in this slide with their grandchildren, who are the 5th generation of our family to live and work on the property. My siblings are all involved in the beef industry and have worked in and out of the business. We operate 3 cattle stations around the Charters Towers district and a small supermarket in Charters Towers. Wambiana is 23,000 hectares, with country ranging from silverleaf ironbark country through to pulled gidgee scrubs. We run 3,000 to 3,500 head of cattle across a range of enterprises, breeding bulls, growing out steers, trading cattle and taking on agistment. We also host primary, secondary and university students on educational tourism programs. My family and I feel a real affinity to this property and to the livestock that we manage. And I'm sure there's, a lot of you will relate to that as well. And we're well aware that we stand on the shoulders of previous generations of risk takers and courageous workers who've put in the hard yards. And it's great to have that history in our family and business, but history doesn't pay bills. And so we're always looking for innovative ways of doing things. We believe in balance, and 2 guiding principles that drive our business are to be economically profitable and ecologically sustainable. And too much focus on one or the other is not going to build a truly sustainable business. Fortunately, I think there are strategies that will do both. So let's start with profit. We talk about profit a lot in agriculture, and I sometimes wonder if others outside the industry wonder whether we're greedy. But I think the reality is, when you hear the information from Phil, where in the last 12 years, a lot of the businesses have made less than 1% return, it's a different story. And I think when you couple that with the high debt loads in the north, you can understand why there's such a lot of hurt in the industry. Before returning to work in the family business, and as a new graduate in agricultural science, I worked with Terry McCosker at RCS in Yeppoon. And I was amazed to learn about the 3 secrets to improving profitability. Terry does a much better job of this over a course, but I'm just going to give a snapshot in a minute. So the secrets are, we can reduce our overheads. For example, land and labour overheads, but we need to be careful to not starve a profit into the business. We can increase our gross margins by cutting direct costs, improving productivity, or increasing sale price. And if we have got a positive gross margin, then we can increase profitability by increasing turnover, or the scalability of the business. So since learning about these secrets, I've been keen to look for opportunities to improve profitability within our business, but also across the industry. Last year I was fortunate to be awarded a Nuffield Scholarship, and I sincerely thank Meat and Livestock Australia for their sponsorship of me through this process. It's an amazing opportunity, and I'd recommend it to any young people here interested who've got an interest or a passion in learning something that you'd get value out of by studying overseas. So, after travelling overseas for 16 weeks last year, through New Zealand, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, the UK, the United States and the United Arab Emirates, what did I find and how did it relate to the secrets of profitability? So the first thing I was looking for was ideas on selection for fertile, environmentally adapted cattle. And this was driven by the appeal of getting good production with low inputs and driving our gross margin. what I learnt was that genetic selection is happening whether we plan for it or not. So we'd better select what we do want. If we introduce a bull into our herd with undesirable traits, he will impact our herd for 15 years. And this highlighted the need for performance recording herds. We need to measure, record, use that information for selection, and cull the non-performers. I was amazed by a visit to Jacarandino in Brazil. They are part of the Delta G group that are performance recording 80,000 female cattle annually and only select bulls from the top 10%. Those bulls are only used for 1 year because they know that the next generation will be genetically superior. The progressive beef producers in the USA and Brazil are using selection indexes for selecting bulls rather than single traits. They give weightings to the various traits depending on their environment and their breeding goals. I also looked into grazing systems, particularly looking for ideas on how to manage pastures to achieve the maximum sustainable production per acre or hectare. And this was driven by trying to increase turnover and reduce overheads per head. The key message I found was that irrespective of the grazing system was to focus on ground cover. Degradation occurs when we don't maintain good ground cover. And amazingly, through good ground cover, we improve the vigour and biodiversity of our pastures. I looked at cell grazing, Serengeti grazing, ultra-high density grazing, and I think all of these systems have positive attributes. And the common thread was strategically grazing the pasture and then giving sufficient rest for the plant to recover. I was also interested in learning about polledness. I believe polled cattle, that is cattle that are born naturally without horns, is the way of the future due to better animal welfare and prevention of losses from dehorning, and so contributing to better gross margins. I determined that there were two key pathways to increasing the polled percentage in our herds. One is to select from within your breed, and the other is to cross with a breed that has a high significance of polled animals. In terms of the crossbreeding, I was interested in adapted Bos Taurus breeds from similar environments to ours. For example, the Mashona cattle from Africa. These breeds offer polledness as well as hybrid vigour. I also looked into polled Brahmins because that's where my interest lies, as it keeps our system very simple and with less mobs to manage through a rotational grazing system. I think the horn poll test in Australia is great for determining which polled bulls are homozygous for the polled gene. The polled gene is dominant, so when you cross a homozygous bull over horned cows, all of the progeny will be polled. And I think kudos to MLA, who were instrumental in providing the funding for the research and development to develop that test that now just involves pulling a hair sample and sending it to a lab. And the final area that I studied was complementary enterprises. And my question was, what other enterprises could we operate with running cattle that would allow us to spread our overheads and create a high gross margin enterprise? The diversified businesses I visited tend to do one of two things. They'd either diversify it into a whole new enterprise, such as adding crayfish production or tourism to their business, or they would intensify their existing cattle enterprise. For example, they may have built a feedlot or started direct marketing their beef. But the key thing seems to be that these people looked for underutilised resources in their business, or leakage of resources that were going out of the business without being paid for, and then they would capitalise on those. The master of this was Joel Salatin from the USA, who Time magazine refers to as the world's most innovative farmer. Joel has combined enterprises from pastured pigs, chickens and cattle, rabbits, vegetables, and he processes and direct markets all of the produce from his farm. He doesn't waste a thing and must be doing something right with an income of $2 million a year off 2,000 acres. Overall, my travels confirmed for me that there are no silver bullets, as much as I tried to find one. However, visiting these successful businesses confirm that working with nature as much as possible lowers costs, is good for the environment, and is good for business. And so that then leads me to 5 strategies that we are trying to improve reproduction at Wambiana by working with nature. Geoff mentioned this as being a simple one, but I think if our goal is to have all of our cows in body condition score 3+ at calving, it does a great thing for our herd because it's highly correlated with getting a high rebreed rate in our cattle. And this was clearly shown in the cash cow project in which we were a participant. I think that goal then is the yardstick that sets up the rest of the year's operations. So we wean calves based on the body condition of the cow, irrespective of the weight of the calf. And we set our stocking rate and plan our paddock rotations to ensure that PTIC cows get up to that 3+ by the time they calve. One of the best ways to manage body condition score is to calve in sync with nature. We calve from October to January to try to match the nutritional needs of the cows with fresh pasture ahead of them. And this is important because we're expecting those cows to raise that calf and reconceive within 3 months of calving. And we've been able to identify cows in our herd now that have produced 8 calves in 8 years in our environment. We also like segregation. And this is following a similar system as proposed by Ian Braithwaite. And we segregate our cows into 2 monthly calving intervals. And this gives us much greater control in our business. It allows, if we're coming into a dry season, then we can feed those cows that are calving early, or we can wean that mob without having to go through the whole herd. Or if it's looking like a prolonged dry, that we can then get in and sell the later calving mobs because we know that they're less profitable than the earlier calvers. Now, to move our herd in the direction we want to go, it's important that we cull the females in our herd that aren't performing. However, the bigger influence for genetic gain will be selecting the right bulls, as they produce more offspring in a year. So bull selection is important. And this is a bull that we're using in our herd. This photo was taken on the weekend with his working clothes on and towards the end of a very dry, wet season. However, his full story can only be told in the data that backs him up. So he's a polled bull and he's a PH sire, so we would expect half of his calves to be polled. His dams had 6 calves in 6 years in a 368-day intercalving interval, which is a great effort. The next figures are EBVs. So for 600-day growth, he's plus 41 and the breed average is 35. And so we like that. We like the EBV to be above the average, but not excessively high because we don't think our country can support excessively high growth. His carcass is 22, the breed average is 20, so he's in the top 45% of the breed. His mature cow size is 43 and the breed average is 42. Again, we're happy with that. We don't want big cows. We don't want to be running elephants. And I guess for those people who heard Kit Farrow yesterday, what we heard was that moderate cows are the most profitable cows. In terms of scrotal size, he's 0.9, the breed average is 0.4, so which places him in the top 25%, and scrotal size is one of the fertility indicators. The other fertility indicator is days to calving. He scores at 0.3, and in this case you want the figure to be as negative as possible, and so coming in at negative 12.4 puts this bull in the top 1% of the breed for days to calving. And Alex McDonald, who won the Genetic Improvement Award on Monday night, credited days to calving as being one of the tools we can really use to focus on improving fertility in Northern Australia. And so then the JAP-OX index is a summary of growth, fertility and carcass characteristics. It's one of those selection indexes that I spoke about earlier. And when we combine all of those, for a self-replacing herd producing JAP-OX steers, the breed average is 23. This bull comes in at 55, which places him in the top 1%. I think this bull has got the potential to do a lot in our herd. And finally, on the last strategy is genomics. It's something that I don't understand very well, but I find it exciting for what it can do for us. I think cattle that have a young age of puberty or a short postpartum and estrus period, which is the time it takes from calving to cycling to be able to fall pregnant again, if they've got that, as if that's short, these are two traits that I really like because they add a lot to productivity in our herd. They also have good heritability, around 50%. And so that means that 50% of the parent's genetic material would be passed on to the progeny. And what's great about this is that it means that if we select for those traits, we will make real genetic progress. Now, these genomic tests currently have a low accuracy because there's not a lot been done. However, MLA is currently funding a project to build that accuracy so that we will be able to just pull a hair sample and send that off to a lab, and we'll be able to get predictions for age of puberty and postpartum and estrus, which I think, again, would be of great help to us. So I'd like to point out that any one of those 5 strategies will not significantly change your business. But I think the power comes from looking at the whole, our business, our people, our land and our livestock, and then making changes, no matter how small, that start heading us towards the destination we want to go. And then it won't take very long then when we'll notice that 1 + 1 + 1 starts to equal 5 or 10 or 15 as those synergies start to come together. And as I start winding up, I'd like to just share with you an example of this. One of our latest projects was to use IVF to multiply some fertile adapted genetics. We purchased some of the oldest cows out of the Belmont herd from CSIRO here in Rockhampton when that research station was being closed down. And so cows like this one had 10 calves in 10 years naturally in this northern environment, which was a fantastic effort. And when I spoke about the JAP-OX index earlier, with combining the fertility, growth and carcass characteristics, well, this cow at +52 for JAP-OX index is in the top 5% of the breed. She possesses the sort of genetics that we need in the north. But at 13 years of age, she's unlikely to have many more calves. And so we decided to do an IVF program with cows like her. Using the same selection index, we selected semen from bulls like this one, who also has a JAP-OX index of +50, placing him in the top 5% of the breed. But he comes with another bonus. He has been horn poll tested and is homozygous polled. And so we know before we even start the program that all of the progeny will be polled. We worked with a group of Brazilian vets from Inventure Genetics, based in Brisbane, to fertilise these eggs and transfer them into our own Brahman cows that had been pregnancy tested empty. The result of this process, using 10 donor cows and semen from 2 bulls, was 51 live calves that are all polled with excellent genetics, will be adapted to our environment, raised in our environment by cows that know our environment. I think this project ties together many of the things that I've spoken about today. We have taken cows that nature has tested and proved they are fertile and adapted to their environment. We've augmented this with technology by using a selection index, poll gene testing and IVF, and we've tapped into an unutilised resource in our business, being those non-pregnant cows, to raise the embryos. Those recipients are raising those calves at the moment and are being remated naturally to calve again next year. And so due to the efficiency of these cattle, we don't need to run as many, so we can take the pressure off our grass resource, which is very important in a year like this of low rainfall. So while this is just one example, I think this type of holistic, integrated thinking and working with nature does offer profitable opportunities for Northern Australian graziers. Now, I know we've covered a lot of country in the last 20 minutes, but I did want to give you the full story of how it evolved. If you would like to discuss any of these topics or the integration, I'm more than happy to speak with you, and my contact details are at the bottom. On one proviso, I'm not an authority on any of them, but I'm having a red hot go at all of them. Thank you.